guess can you just tell us a little bit about your story and your childhood?
Okay. You know what a shtetl is? A shtetl?
Kind of.
Anybody that knows what a shtetl is?
A little village.
It's a Yiddish word
You
for
got it, sir. Say it
small
loud.
town. Small town. So I was born in a small town in Poland, and I was born in 1931. That makes me what? Quick, everybody. Okay, 84. That's pretty old, isn't it? Yeah. I don't feel old, okay? How's that? So, so that's where I was born, in Poland at that time. And this, now it is part of Ukraine. After World War II, they divided up, you know, Poland a little differently as it was before World War II. You know what year World War II was, started?
1938.
39, you're close, very close, 1939. So in 1939, I was 8 years old, a little younger than you guys. So I was 8 years old, and the war broke out in 1939. And I remember it vividly when it happened, you know, a very life-changing event, you know, in my life. When you're 8 years old and Hitler, everybody knows who Hitler was, right? A Nazi. Didn't like Jews, did he? He wanted to annihilate all of them in Europe. So I was 8 years old, and I remember the date, and then a few weeks later, Germany and Russia signed a pact. It was called the Ribbentrop-Molotov Pact. Ribbentrop was the foreign minister of Germany, and Molotov was the foreign minister of Russia. And they decided, of course, Poland lost the war. You know, the Nazis came, the German army invaded, and they defeated the Polish army. So, but since they made that pact between Russia and the Soviet Union,
Germany.
pardon?
Russia and Germany. Between Russia and Germany, not Russia and Soviet Union.
Soviet Union at that time.
Right.
19, yeah, it was the Soviet Union in 1939, and they divided up Poland between them, and we were under the Russians, and this was okay. So we were under the Russians from 1939 till 1941, when Germany, Hitler, attacked. Who was in charge in the Soviet Union at that time? Stalin. Right? Does that sound familiar too? So it was Hitler, Stalin made a pact, and I gave you the names of the foreign ministers, and they signed this kind of pact, and they divided up Poland. And we, our shtetl, fell under the rule of the Soviet Union, of the Russians, the Soviet Union. Okay? And when Hitler attacked, I know the exact date, I remember that date too. The World War broke out when Hitler attacked Poland. It was September 1st, 1939, September 1st. And now, on June 22nd, 1941, Hitler decided, he just made a pact with Stalin, right? And now he attacked Stalin. He attacked the Soviet Union. So this peace between them didn't last very long. So now, a few days later, so when Hitler or Germany, let's just say Germany and Soviet Union. Germany attacked the Soviet Union on June 22nd. My dad, so the whole family lived in the shtetl, in the Polish shtetl. And everybody thought that the war may not last long, you know. So the family, the common wisdom was to family stays together, except my father, may God bless his memory, said, no, we are not going to wait, because we knew that we were going to be occupied by Germany, and Dad was afraid, and he knew, and he was smart enough to know that there's going to be, we didn't know the word Holocaust, what it meant at that time, but there's going to be, the Jews are not going to be doing very well under the German occupation. So we decided to flee. And of course we saw, I told you we were under the Russian rule, so they started, when Hitler attacked, Germany attacked, the Russian Red Army, the army, started to withdraw from Poland, you know, because he was advancing. The armies of Germany advanced against the Soviet Union. They were pretty sure they were going to win that war, you know, Germany. But they didn't. So, our part of Poland was occupied by the Germans, but we fled. And we fled with the Russian army. We saw the army withdrawing, leaving, and we decided to leave with them. And I know the date, on the 28th, that's 22nd, 28th, 6 days after Germany attacked Poland. 6 days later, we fled. And that was the right thing to do. But we wound up, and we were several, on horse and buggy, by the way, on horse and buggy. You know, my dad got a horse. Well, we always had horses in Poland, and so he had a horse and a wagon, and we fled. And it was my brother and myself, and my father and mother. So there's 4 of us, and then our neighbor's 4 boys. Our neighbor came that evening. He saw the horse and buggy that he knew we were going to leave, and he had 7 children, 4 boys and 3 girls. And he came and he realized that we were going to leave that evening, so he asked my father, would you please take these boys? And they were 18, 19, 20, and 22 years old. The oldest was actually 22 or maybe 23. So they were older than us. I was now, remember this was 1941, so I was now 10 years old when we fled. And we retreated with the Soviet army. And we were on the road a long time. I don't remember exactly how long, but I would just guess about maybe 4 weeks, 6 weeks maybe as much as 6 weeks on the road. Horse and buggy through the Ukraine. Poland and the Ukraine had a border between them, and we fled towards the Ukraine. And then we finally, in one of the big cities, we got on a train. So there were 8 of us now. Remember, 4 boys and 4 of us. My father, mother, my brother, and myself. And we got on the train, and we wound up in Kazakhstan. Did you hear me tell the story before? Saw anybody of you? Yeah, that I mentioned Kazakhstan? It's now an independent country. It used to be part of the Soviet Union. And so we wound up in Kazakhstan, and we stayed there for 4 years. until after the war ended. And it was May the 8th, although the Russians say May the 9th, but it was May the 8th, and I remember that too. 1945, Hitler was defeated, and he committed suicide. You probably knew that, right? And so we decided to go back to Poland. So we stayed in the Soviet Union more than 4 years. And now it took us a long time to get back. And when we came back to Poland, our big family, we had a very, very large family. About, I would add up, because there were 8 siblings on my mother's side and 8 siblings on my father, 9 siblings on my father's side. It was a big, big family. So I tried to add them all up. I didn't know everybody, all my cousins and my aunts and uncles and the grandparents. When we returned back to Poland, there was nobody survived, not one person. They were all killed. That's now known as the Holocaust. So they died in the Holocaust. The only one survived in our family was just the 4 of us. And had my dad not decided to leave as we did in 1941, the name Hasten would have disappeared. There wouldn't have been a Hasten. And then there probably wouldn't have been a Hasten Hebrew Academy.
Probably no Hebrew Academy at all.
It would have been an academy, but under a different name. But anyway, so that's what happened. So I want to add, I think I'd like to hear more questions.
Okay, so I guess since you played a giant role in making the school, how was the education that you had as a child before you left?
Well, there wasn't much. I did go to a cheder, a Jewish school. It's an afternoon program. In other words, during the day. So let's start at the age when the war broke out. When I was 8 years old. Okay. So I already went to a public school, which was in Polish. We are in Poland. So I think I finished 2 grades. I don't think I finished, but I was already in the 2nd grade.
You should have finished because it was June.
And
by the June time, 2nd grade should be over. Should have been over, right? In June, school year was over.
Yeah, but then when the Soviets came in,
1939.
everything changed. So
Right.
it was no longer Poland. Now it's Russian. So I started learning Russian already. But I didn't go to school. There was no school for except the cheder. Also, there was very little. It wasn't like a school because the cheder was an afternoon program. But I remember going and learning, and I was not a bad student at that time. So I did study Hebrew, and of course we had Torah studies in the afternoon, and we already actually started Gemara. Gemara we started real early at the age of 5.
So was it somebody else's house?
Would they know Baba Metzia, Baba Kama? No.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sorry.
Oh,
The boys are
you do?
learning the Mishnah,
Yeah?
okay.
Baba
The
Metzia?
Milner Mishnah.
Yeah. And I remember how it starts. Shnayim ochzin betalit. Remember that? When you start out Baba
Yeah, they
Metzia?
did that.
Baba Metzia?
What is
Shnayim ochzin betalit?
Right.
I remember that.
There's a property dispute if 2 people
Yeah,
are in
yeah,
the same.
yeah.
That's exactly what they're learning.
Yeah.
In Hebrew. You really?
Yes,
Ah.
Lenny, Tristan, Max, all 3 are in that
Yeah.
class.
But they started us real early. When I was only 5 years old, I could read and write Hebrew in cheder, and I learned a lot of other things too by heart, like Shira Shirim, Agdamut, that we do on Shavuot, right, the second day. Back to schooling. So there was little school because again, it's wartime, you know. So it's wartime. It isn't normal anymore. As I told you, my life has changed now, even for those 2 years that we were under the Soviet rule. So there was very little schooling, I'm sorry to say. But my mother taught me very at home, you know, for those 2 years. And then, of course, when we escaped towards the Ukraine and then on to Kazakhstan, I did not go to school at all anymore until my dad wouldn't let me go to school there because this was under the communist system. The communist system, he was afraid that in school I would be indoctrinated into the communist program, and he didn't want me to become a communist, my dad. My dad was very much anti-communist.
So do you have any regrets about that?
Having what?
Regrets? Regrets? Do you think it was the right idea
Yes,
that you didn't?
Yes, I do. I did. And I used to blame it on my father, but then I realized when the older I got that he was correct. He was correct. Because in school, you had to report to the teacher what's happening at home. And if you said something against the government, and if you said Stalin was an evil man, then the NKVD, which is the present KGB, you know, you would be arrested. Because this is under that system. This was the communist dictatorship. You couldn't speak, you couldn't say anything against the government. That's another thing to this day, you know. I remember the first time when I came to America, I'm getting ahead now, and I was already 20 years old, and I couldn't speak any English, but I did get a job, and finally, when I learned a little bit of English, one of my co-workers, the name of Roger, and I won't say how bad what he said because it's not proper to mention this in school, but so when I said something about President Truman was the president at that time when we came to America, and I said something nice about Truman. Well, he didn't like President Truman, so he said something very bad, which I can't repeat, but I'll make it sound like, oh, the hell with Truman. And I looked around, I thought somebody already listened because I was afraid I was going to be arrested. You say something against the president, you go to jail, you know, if you do that under that kind of a dictatorship. So I was shocked when he said, oh, as I said, he said something worse than that. Something like, oh, the hell with the president. You can't say that. And then I realized I am a free man. There's freedom of speech. You can say it. So I realized then why I love America so much. Because of freedom of speech and freedom to pray, you know, freedom of religion, which was not free under the Soviet system. All right, so I went ahead a little bit too far, but I did try to answer your question about schooling. So I had very little schooling actually after the war broke out in '39. Very little schooling. The schooling that I had is what my mother taught me at home, and I had very, very little. As I said, it was not a normal life anymore for me. In fact, I wrote this book, and I thought about it. I wrote a book called "I Shall Not Die" because I was very sick and I almost died several times. But I didn't die because God, you know, I believe in Hashem, and He saved me. So if I would write the book again, I would change it to "A Child of War," because from the age of 8 till the war was over in 1945, so I was already how old? From 8? 39, 40. I was 14. So, as I told you already, so we came back to Poland, and it was no longer Poland. I mean, it was still Poland, but then it became the Ukraine. It's no longer Poland. Where I was born in Poland is now the Ukraine. Okay, so I was 14 years old, and then I started going to school more normally, and I was Austria, not in Poland, not in here. So I would have changed the name of my book to A Child of War.
So what were your memories of holidays as a child? Like,
Okay. Now, Mother made sure, although it was against the law to pray, but we would pray clandestinely, you know. Like if there was Yom Kippur, Mother made, by the way, there were very few Jewish people where we were in Kazakhstan, very few. But she kept a calendar, my mother, and a Jewish calendar, which was not an easy thing to do. But she did, and she was correct. She knew when the holidays, because if you don't have a calendar, you don't know when the holidays would come up. Right now, if I want to ask you, when is Hanukkah going to be?
Sunday.
Oh, Sunday. How do you know that? Oh, you have a calendar. You can look it up on your
iPad.
yeah, okay. The iPad tells you also.
Facebook
We
can
didn't have
remember.
any iPads, we didn't have any calendars. We were in the wild over there in Kazakhstan. It was very, very tough. I don't know how we survived. That's why I called my book I Shall Not Die, because we almost died, all of us. But we made it through somehow, God's help. So, so as far as the holidays, Mother knew when the holidays were, and she used to even remind us about the Sabbath, you know. Sometimes we didn't even, actually we didn't know the 7 days, but we were on the road sometimes, and when we were trying to escape the Soviet Union to get out, it was also not easy. I would have to sit here for hours to tell you what we went through. But, so she would remind us. I remember she used to, we spoke Yiddish in the family, with my mom, dad, my brother, we spoke Yiddish. So she would say, remember, today is Shabbos. Although we were on the road and we had to go get some food so we can survive. I used to go in the field and dig up, it was in the late summer, I used to dig up some potatoes. We were trying to get back to Poland. And so we would go, and she would say, remember, today is the Sabbath, today is Shabbat, Shabbos, in Yiddish, Shabbos, you pronounce it Shabbos, in Yiddish. She would remind us, and then when it came the holidays like Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, she, as I said, she kept a calendar, and she told us today is Yom Kippur, so we are fasting, although we were fasting almost every day. In the 4 years, I don't remember ever to go to bed on a full stomach. I was always hungry. Always. But I made up for it when I came to America. I used to weigh 230 pounds. I'm just joking a little bit, you know. But once we got out of the Soviet Union, we were no longer starved. We were starving like we did during the war. Because the war, everybody, that wasn't just our family, everybody, there was a shortage of food during the war.
So how did your how did you celebrate the holidays?
Okay.
How did that change
okay.
when you
so,
came here?
Yeah, so we would have, on Yom Kippur, I remember, we would go, we had enough for a minyan. You know, we had enough people to have a minyan, 10 males, and we would go to our neighbors, and we would close the windows and put a blanket over the window so nobody could see us or hear us. And my mother had a siddur. We didn't have a machzor, but she had a siddur, and I'm describing Yom Kippur. So we would pray and very quietly so nobody could hear us, because if the NKVD, the police, would find out that we are praying, we would be arrested. It was against the law to pray. You probably never heard this before. That's how bad it was during the Soviet system.
Not in our place.
In your place, you could pray.
You could
And
pray. It
what
wasn't. It
year
was
was
encouraged.
What year?
1970.
But I'm talking about during the war, when Stalin was in charge.
Yeah.
It's a different time. I know things have changed later on. Yeah, but not during the war.
You wouldn't encourage to pray. You know, they would tell you not to do it. But
It was against the law. Like, it was against, you pray, and they arrest you.
and it's not just Judaism. Any religion. It's for
Yeah.
Christian. And
But,
it was
all, exactly. They were anti-religion. So the whole system, the communist system, was set up that way. Okay.
So when you came to Indianapolis, why were you so interested in like Jewish education?
Okay. It took me a long time before I made it to Indianapolis. We actually, I told you we were liberated in 1945. It was right after the war. For 6 years, until 1951, we spent in a DP camp in Austria, not in Poland. We fled Poland too because the communists were still there in 1945. Stalin was still in charge. So we left, fled from Poland to Czechoslovakia. From Czechoslovakia, we crossed in the middle of the night the border to Austria, and then there were DP camps, where DP means displaced persons without a country. So there were tens of thousands of Jews and non-Jews too that didn't have a country. So they set up these camps, and they called them the DP camps. And so we stayed in several DP camps in Austria for 6 years until we registered to come to the United States, and in 1951 we made it to the United States, and I just reached, in fact, my birthday. We arrived in the United States on April the 10th, 1951, and my birthday is April 23rd. So 13 days. So I was 19 when I came to America, but 19, what did I say? 10, 23. 13 days later, I reached the age of 20. So I was 20 years old. And we came to Minneapolis, Minnesota. Want to hear a funny way how we got to Minneapolis? You want to hear that? So when my dad, I was still a minor, of course, when my dad decided we are going to try to get to the United States of America. So he went to the embassy. Actually, it was a consul general in Linz, Austria, and he went to register, and I went with him. And I remember the conversation was in German now. Now we're talking German, okay? So they asked him in German, Mr. Hasten, they pronounced it Hasten, not Hasten. Mr. Hasten, you want to go to America? And he says, yes. My wife and I and my son want to come to America. My brother was not there at the time. He was already in Israel. He went in 1948. He went to Israel. He fought for the state of Israel. He was older than I am. You know my brother Mark? Have you met him?
Yeah.
Yes.
So So they asked my father, you want to go to America? Where do you want to live in America? My dad says, New York. They said, sorry, New York is full. Full of what? Full of refugees. Okay. So they said, give us another place. And he said, do you have any relatives in America? And he said, no, we don't have any relatives. So tell us, where do you want to go? And he said, I don't know America. I don't know any of the cities in America. He said, but they said, if you don't tell us, you can't go to America. You got to tell us, something to that effect. And he said, he was thinking about it a little bit, and then he said, how about where the climate is the same as in Poland, where I come from? Oh, Poland is very cold. Yes. Well, we have an opening in Minneapolis, Minnesota. It's cold there. So you're going to Minneapolis. So that's how we wound up in Minneapolis. And we stayed there for 13 years before I got a job, and they transferred me, my company transferred me to Indianapolis, where they had a plant here. So that's how I wound up in Indianapolis. And I was already 33 years old, roughly. And I was already married. Okay, well, what was the other question? Oh, all right, so now about education.
Yeah.
So remember, I didn't have any education, or much education. Actually, there were some schools in the DP camps, but they were mediocre. Anybody know what the word mediocre is?
Not very good.
So.
Average. Average.
That's it.
So.
So they weren't the best of schools. So when I came to America, I found a job. I got a job. I got two jobs, actually. The first one, it's another story. I won't go into that. But it didn't last very long because they wouldn't give me a dime raise. So my dad says, you're not going to work for these folks. Anyway. And then I got a job, and I stayed with the job 13 years, and they transferred me here. So I went to, as I said, I had to work, so I went to West High Evening School in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And so I studied, I worked during the day, and I studied at night. I learned English. I even know what mediocre means. So it wasn't easy at this age, you know. I'm 20 years old, and so I take high school courses. And but I was a very good student, you know. So I was getting ready at this West High Evening School to go to college. And I wanted to be an engineer. So I took courses like math and science, and these are the courses that I thought I'll need to, because I don't have a high school diploma, because I would have had to go to school for 2-3 more years to get a high school, because I didn't have enough credits. But I did have enough credits to go to college, and I was accepted after 3 years in high school, evening school. I was accepted without a diploma. I was accepted at the MIT, Minnesota Institute of Technology. You really thought it was Massachusetts, right? No, MIT, Minnesota Institute of Technology. And I was going to be an engineer. And I studied for 3 years while I was working during the day, and then they let me work during the evening, so I went to school during the day. It was very, very hard work, you know, having a full-time job, supporting my parents. And then I decided I didn't want to be an engineer after 3 years, because I was promoted on my job. So I was making 80 cents an hour when I started. 80 cents. There was no minimum wage. They just, when you start, 80 cents an hour. And then I got to 90 cents an hour, and $1, $1.25. I worked myself up to become the after, well, I was 13 years, after 10 years, I became the superintendent of the plant. I could already speak English, and I was in management. So I changed from engineering to management. I loved management. And when I came to, but I never graduated. I do not have a degree in management. I don't have a degree in engineering, but I do have an honorary degree from Touro College. So I can say, you can call, my brother is called Dr. Mark Hasten because he also got qualified. He actually became an engineer, but he has a doctorate degree like I do. We got it at the same time. So he's called Dr. Mark Hasten, but I don't want to be called Dr. Hart Hasten because I don't deserve it. I never, but an honorary degree they gave me. Okay, so that's my education. But okay, but then I always missed the Jewish education, which stopped, when I was 8 years old or less than that. So so then when I went into my own business after 1 year to be a superintendent of a plant here in Indianapolis, and then I started earning. So I became an entrepreneur. If anybody of you can spell entrepreneur,
Should be in the spelling bee, yeah.
there's some good spellers here, I bet. Yeah. But that's all right. I'm not testing you. That's okay. I'm not going to put you on the spot. Okay. So so I went into my own business and was successful. Made some money, and I decided I wanted my children. We already had 2 children when we had 1 child when we came to Indianapolis, but the other 2 were born already. They're Hoosiers. They were born here, and I wanted them to have a Jewish education. So I got involved with, at that time it was Rabbi Gray, and he's the one that had a meeting of parents that wanted to have a more intensive Jewish education, which was provided first in the afternoon by, at that time it was called the JEA, Jewish Educational Association. And we thought, and I was on the board of the JEA, and I wanted my children to have more than which was offered, only 2 hours a week or something like that in the afternoon, and I thought we should have a day school, and that the rabbi suggested that. So I got involved in that, and we formed a committee and then a board to establish a Jewish day school in Indianapolis, and they made me chairman of this committee, and I knew nothing about Jewish. I didn't know anything about day school education, but I'm a fast learner, so I learned fast, and we got a board. And in 1971, in September of 71, we started with 2 grades. No, actually not grades, 1 grade and 1 kindergarten. So a kindergarten and a 1st grade, and the school was at B'nai Torah. Am I looking at the right place?
Over that way.
Over here, okay, B'nai Torah, right.
Yeah.
So, and a few years later, we actually built a building, and then we added to it. And the last building here was the Cultural Arts Center. So, my children were the first children enrolled in kindergarten, 1st grade, and every year we added a grade. So at one time, we actually already started high school here, but we didn't have enough students, so we couldn't go on. So we just have 8 grades. How many in the 7th now? Just all of you are here? 7. You all stay for the 8th grade, and then, okay. maybe we'll have a high school before you finish the 8th grade. Good, sounds good. Well, we have one student. Okay, does that answer your question?
Yeah.
So we wanted to have more intensive Jewish education. And you don't know how lucky you are that you have a principal by the name of Mrs. Miriam Kettinger. She is probably, she doesn't supposed to hear this, but she's probably the best principal in the United States of America, of a Jewish day school, in my opinion. And I don't think I'm exaggerating, because I know many schools and I know many principals. She is number one. You didn't hear that?
Yeah, I didn't. Okay.
Okay, any more questions?
Do you know anything?
Do you have any advice for kids now?
I'm going to repeat what Lenin said, which is a terrible thing to do. Lenin. Учиться, учиться, учиться. Which means, this is Russian, and we can speak a little bit of Russian.
He can.
I can still remember it. Learn, 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 learn. Study. It means, actually it's more like study. Study, study, study. That's something that I'm still missing today. All those years that I'm still trying to make up for it, for all those years that I didn't have the opportunity to go to school.
Anybody else have any other questions?
How many
I heard the
languages do
buzzer,
you
which means
speak?
time is up, right?
No,
Right.
how many languages do you speak?
English is my 7th language, and I could speak each one of them fluently when I was. So we started off with Yiddish. Was my first. Actually, my first language was Polish, and I remember that too because we were speaking Polish, and at home we spoke Yiddish. So it's Polish, Yiddish. Then in Cheder was Hebrew, and then came the Russians, and then so we learned Russian, and I could speak Russian very well at one time. Now I cannot converse with him too much, except I do remember certain things, in Russian. Скажи-ка, дядя, ведь недаром Москва спаленная пожаром французу отдана. Ведь были схватки боевые, да говорят еще какие. Недаром вся Москва помнит день Бородина. You see, this is a poem that everybody in Russia knows. Although I didn't go to school, but by the way, I did study on my own, and there was a library there, and I would go and study, and I could really speak good Russian, and it saved my life one time. They arrested me, and the captain, the policeman arrested me, and when I started speaking to him, he was Russian, and this was in Poland, which is the Ukraine, and he started speaking to me. I started answering him in Russian, and he said, "How do you know Russian?" And I said, "What do you mean? We just came back from Kazakhstan, so we spoke Russian there." He says, "Yeah, but we arrested only the Polish young kids, teenagers, and the Ukrainians. They speak Ukrainian and Polish, and you speak Russian." And he didn't believe me, and he kept me for several hours. And they were beating up on the other kids. Boy, they were crying. And he didn't touch me because I was a Russian. It saved my life. So anyway, that's so the language. So I already started with Polish, Yiddish, Hebrew, Ukrainian, Russian. So that's 5. Then German. When we came back, we went Austria. We speak German there. And English, number 7. And I remember a little girl when we came to Minneapolis, and I was 19, remember? But I couldn't speak English. And she said, my next door neighbor, a beautiful little girl, said, "Hi." Guess what? I didn't know what it meant. I didn't know what hi meant. That's how bad my English was. Although I really tried in the camp, we tried, I knew I was going to be in America, so I tried, but, you know, I was busy with, you know, trying to make a living, and I was busy, so I didn't study English until I really came here. But the word high was strange to me. I didn't know what it meant. That's how bad it was. So English is my 7th language. And I love English. I really do. I love America. I always like to say that. This is the best country ever on the face of this planet. Ever. And I've been to many countries. I actually made enough money to take a trip with my wife around the world in a Concorde.
Oh.
What's a Concorde? What's a Concorde?
That
The
man.
name of the plane is a Concorde. I guess nobody knows.
It's a
They're gone.
super
They're
fast,
not,
yeah,
no.
they don't have it.
This is
Yeah,
the
I
one.
remember doing my childhood in the car.
The teacher will tell you what a Concorde is. So we were 21 days around the world. So I've been around the world, and I've been to many, many countries. America is #1. It's an exceptional country. So we have to save it. We have to do everything we can, because they want to destroy us, you know. They were people that don't like America. You know what happened yesterday, or day before yesterday already, right? Did you hear that?
In California.
In California? Yeah. They don't like, some that don't like us. But this is a great country. And I love country. And I also love Israel. So we traveled to Israel. We have 2 of our children who attended this school, made Aliyah, and they live in Israel. Our daughter, already for 25 years at least, and our son, youngest son, has been there already 12 years, and they both attended the Hebrew Academy, and they speak Hebrew pretty well. Imagine. And I have grandchildren. I have 3 grandchildren who are in the Israeli army. Some already are out of the army, but 3 already, and one is like a Navy SEAL in the Israeli army. Like a Navy SEAL. It's even more than that. He's very, very bright. And by the way, he's starting school now, which is part of the army program that they have, and he is going to be studying at Bar Ilan University in Israel. This is my grandson. So I don't have any great-grandchildren, but I have 12 grandchildren. My brother has many great-grandchildren, and I'm waiting already for great-grandchildren. Is it interesting to you? Was it? Yeah?
Very.
Really? Okay. Very good. But I can spend a lot of time talking to you. Well, I wrote a book. Someday, I know you're busy now with studies, but someday you read my book, I Shall Not Die. And I write about how we started the day school in the book. I have a chapter on that.
Mm-hmm.
It was not easy. So someday you'll do it. And you're 13, 12.
12.
Everybody 12?
I'm 13.
I'm 13.
Uh-huh. How many languages do you speak?
So far, I'm learning 3. 4. American, Hebrew, Amharic, and Tigrinya.
American. You speak American.
I mean, no, English. Sorry.
That's good. I like that. Very good. Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you so
Thank
much for
you.
sharing this with
I
the
enjoyed talking.